I'm deploying. How am I gonna survive this? If you found out that you're gonna deploy, or if you're just wondering how you're gonna survive deployment, then watch this episode of On the Net.
Okay, come over to 19 and confirm it and say, hey, we need help finding the bypass on ourselves.
Hi guys, I'm Sarah Jane. Welcome to my channel. This is the third episode of On the Net. On the Net is a series that I've created just full of military questions that I've received in the past or that I've thought of myself when I first got into the Army and I was just wondering how I was going to make it in the Army. That's what this series is about. This is episode 3, which is how to survive deployment. Now, a little background about me. I have deployed twice, and both times you kind of just nail it on the head after a while. The first deployment was definitely kind of hard adjusting. Second deployment, I felt like it was a little bit easier to get through the deployment. I'm gonna give you 5 tips in this video. Tip number 1, form a hobby. Some people don't have hobbies. Like, some people legitimately, like, I have a best friend, she legitimately does not have a hobby. She just likes to hang out with people. But that's not gonna be as effective when you're deployed. And it also depends on your environment. If you can leave the base that you're on, then you can, maybe go do other things with other people and that will work. But if you are restricted to the area of operations that you're having to work in, that can kind of be a little bit harder. So forming a hobby. For me, my hobby has been for a long time, YouTube is something that I really enjoy. So deployment is nice because I can really focus on YouTube during my off time. Ironically enough, you have more downtime during deployment than you do when you are back home because you are away from family, you are away from all the extracurricular things that you normally like to do, so you can really focus and hone in on a hobby. Tip number 2, get a routine. So for me, one of the hobbies that I also pursued while I was deployed was the gym. Especially on my first deployment, I really honed in on the gym and YouTube. So my routine kind of consisted of physical training in the morning, went to breakfast, went to work from about 9 to like whenever they let you go off. For both deployments, we try to keep it till about 1700, but sometimes it extends past that depending on the training that you're doing. So whenever you eventually get off for the day, and then dinner, and then after that I hit the gym. Now, as time progressed, so this is like 2 a day, so I worked out once in the morning and then I worked out once in the evening. As deployment progressed, I was seeing lots of improvements within my body during my first deployment, so I actually turned it into 3 days where I also worked out before lunch. So that was my routine every single day. I knew what I was going to be doing. It was just clockwork. This. The only thing that sometimes changed was what time I was getting off work. Like I said, just depending on the training that we were doing or like what mission we had going on. And honestly, like, it becomes kind of like Groundhog Day, but in a good way. And it's difficult to explain, but it just helps make the time go by faster because you're not just sitting and thinking about how you miss people and how you just want to be with your loved ones. You're continuing to stay active all throughout the day, but without tiring yourself out. And then you go to bed and you repeat it. And maybe that sounds depressing for some people, but for me, that was really, really helpful in making the days go by faster. Tip number 3, do stay in touch with your loved ones. And this can be hard for some people because life does continue back in the States while you are deployed and people start doing other things that maybe you guys didn't do together. And you just kind of have to get used to it, but still stay a part of their life because it's really sucks when you just close yourself off and you don't talk to those people anymore, and then you almost like forget about them, and then you come home and they are still there. The people you love are still in your life, and it's just a worse transition handling it that way than just staying in contact with your loved ones. And yes, you miss them, but you are still a part of their life even though you're far away. Tip number 4, make your sleeping area as homey as possible. So for me, on my first deployment, I only brought my military gear, and that was such a mistake because they had nothing and it just was awful. So my second deployment, I brought a tough box that I packed into the Connex, and in it I put a bunch of clothes from home that I knew would help with the season because you're not in your uniform all the time. You do wear your civilian clothes a lot. So I brought clothes, I brought a blanket that I put on my bed every night that just kind of reminded me of home. I brought books from home. I brought pictures. I had manual photos printed out and I just kind of put them around my bed area so that I can see them. So Having done that the second time, I'm so glad I did, because your little sleeping area just becomes your little nook, and it becomes a place of peace that you can go back to after the work day is done, and it just reminds you of home. So do that. I promise you, you won't regret doing that. And then tip number 5, which is the last tip, is do not start counting down the days too early. And I know it sucks, and I was prone to doing my first deployment. I wasn't so bad about it, but my second deployment, I was so ready to come home. I was like, I am so sick of this. I am over this. I just want to go home. And in my agenda, like starting at day 186, I started counting down, and that was horrible for me, because that is so far out from actually going home. Don't do that to yourself. It's not good for yourself mentally. Just keep pushing through, and I honestly would recommend maybe 60 days out. Start counting down this within 2 months, and that's something you can be excited about, because also, if you count out so far out and then your flight gets pushed to the right and you don't get to go home when you thought you were gonna get to go home, it just hurts so much more. Take it from somebody that did this. My flight got pushed 5 days to the right, and it just hurt. So don't do it. If you guys are about to deploy, or if you guys are just wondering what deployment's like and how to survive it, I hope that this video was helpful for you. Comment below any tips that you have if you've deployed before and what you did to kind of help yourself get through the deployment. Like this video if you did find it helpful, and don't forget to subscribe so you see more videos from my series on the net. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, guys, and I will see you guys in another one. Bye.